Melanie Bala started her career in radio at the age of 18 years old. Since then, she's been on our radio, giving us the news, on our TV screens, dropping the latest music videos, and of course, gracing our TV screens as a talk show host. Melanie is one of the most accomplished media personalities in our country, now a strict but hot mother of two, a budding yoga instructor, and of course a member of the Metro FM breakfast team. Melanie Bala is definitely a leader in the game. Mal, thank you so much for being here. You have no idea how long I've waited for this conversation.
Populicious, hi.
Dude, so good to be
We've
here.
come from far.
Babe.
Yeah.
We actually have, and in so many ways, I was thinking about this chat and how much we have in common. Pretoria,
Yes.
radio,
Yes.
news.
Yes.
So we've got a lot to unpack in terms of our stories and our journeys and how they've connected.
Yeah.
And I definitely want to do that. But I want to start at the beginning with your foundation.
Okay.
As a young person growing up in Pretoria and someone who comes from a mixed-race family in deep, dark apartheid times, do you even know how your parents met?
Yes, I do. So my dad was a professional soccer player.
Amazing.
And he always says, he was hot.
Of course.
And all the girls wanted him,
Yeah.
but he wanted my mom. And
wow.
they have this really cute story of so she would go to the movies on a Saturday by herself.
Okay.
And the one day she was sitting in the movies and he came to sit next to her and was like, is there anyone sitting here? And she said no. And then they were kind of sitting together and started chatting, and that's how they met.
Jeepers. Do you know how difficult it was for them to get to, obviously, marriage and having kids in those times? Were both sides of the family accepting of the union?
Yeah. Family-wise, yes.
Okay.
Both sides were very... And, to put it in context, so they grew up in Marabastad in Pretoria, right? You know Marabastad.
Of course.
Of course, yes.
Notorious.
Yes. And Marabastad was a mixed area, right? And this was
Yes.
before the Group Areas Act of 1951, I think, or 61, the Group
Yes.
Areas Act. So they all grew up mixed, colored people, Indian people, Chinese people, they
Sure.
grew up together. And so there was an acceptance absolutely from both sides of the family. But in the getting married, obviously that's where it became a little more difficult.
And illegal.
And it was illegal. And they had to apply and get permission to get married. And they actually, as part of a really interesting, messed up apartheid kind of law thing, he had to, or my mom had to kind of renounce being colored and accept a new, identity. And so it was just really, it was really bizarre, which now we talk about it and it's like, what? But back then, those were the rules. That was the law.
And how much of that apartheid era mixed raceness of what you were growing up in, because it's a lot to contend with. One, in apartheid, and then two, you're still mixed race, and then two races from different, are coming together.
Yeah.
How much did that affect you as children growing up in those times? Were you privy to that level of racism, or was that shielded from you?
No, very much privy to it, and you couldn't not be. I think obviously there's a point where you grow up and your level of awareness kicks in around how widespread it is, right? So my dad had put us in private school in Pretoria, so we went to school with kids from all races,
Sure.
right? White, black, colored, Indian, Chinese, foreign nationals, etc. So that was the school environment.
Yeah.
But then my cousin left that environment, and then she would go home to the colored township, and so you were very much aware that there are these differences.
Sure.
And I think for me, when that realization kind of kicked in, or when I really started being aware of it, I must have been maybe about 10 or 11 years old. And I remember going out to the post box, where they delivered mail, obviously still, and pulling out a flyer. And it was local government election time, funny enough.
Right where we are.
Right. And pulling out a flyer from the Conservative Party, who was campaigning in the area. And on the flyer, they obviously were addressing different issues that were of concern. So with the Group Areas Act, they'd taken all the Chinese people and moved them to this tiny little area called Claremont, which was in and amongst predominantly lower income Afrikaans people.
I see.
And so obviously the Conservative Party, that's their base. That's where they were kind of guaranteed to get votes. But on the pamphlet, it made an example of my parents living in the neighborhood and how this was such a terrible thing.
Oh, wow.
And this is the kind of thing we need to stop. So now that I was 10 or 11 and, I loved reading, so I read everything I got. And I kind of looked at this thing and was like, wait, that's my dad's name. And that's my mom's name. And that was for me kind of a moment where it was like, okay,
Jeepers,
all right.
This is what it is.
This is what it is on a large scale.
Yeah, because the news will do that.
Yeah.
Will bring it so much closer to home when it is actually you and your family.
Yeah, I mean, it's just my mom and my dad. But that moment was like, oh, okay, they don't want us here. We are an aberration. We are something that they do not want in their midst. And why is that? And it's based purely off of race. So I'd say for me, about that age was kind of when my awareness really kind of, okay.
Jolted you.
Yeah.
And how did that affect you as a young woman going forward in your life? What was your perception of just people and the space that you're living in, trying to get ahead in?
Yeah.
Were you conscious of that at all?
I think you can't not be. But like I say, I think the home that I came from, my parents were very much about equality and judging people based on the people that they are, nothing else, not religion. I come from a background where we have all kinds of religions. One Sunday I'm at my Muslim grandmother's, house for lunch where it's Eid, and the following weekend we're at the Chinese side of the family celebrating Double 10,
Sure.
So we really came from like a really mixed multicultural background, right? And like I said, my parents always enforced that people are people, right? You judge them based only on how they treat you and kind of how they are. And so without a doubt, I think that was what kind of skewed or kind of informed how I navigated spaces.
Sure.
Right? My parents always used to say to us, don't ever let anyone tell you that they are better than you. You're not better than them either, but you're just as good as.
Sure.
And that's kind of been the thing that has stood me in good stead, I'd say, in my life. No one's better than me.
Sure.
But I'm not better than you either. We're just as good as each other.
It's powerful. Let's talk about you in high school.
Yeah.
What were you like?
Oh my
were
God,
you sporty, nerdy, popular? Were those good
None of the
years
above.
for you? Okay, so what were you?
I come from a family of four,
Okay.
and I had two older siblings, and I was the baby of the
Yes.
family until my baby sister came along. And the two of them were like really popular, really outgoing,
Oh, wow.
really, and I was just like the quiet little baby sister. That's how I was known around Pretoria for
Sure.
the longest time. Was like, "Are you sewing sister?" or "Are you sewing sister?"
Yes.
Right? Because I was really quiet. I was incredibly shy.
Okay.
Very much a bookworm. If you found me, I'd be in a corner sitting somewhere and just like reading everything and anything I could get my hands onto. Not sporty at all. I always said I did sports at school under duress because I was tall.
Because you had to.
Yes, and I was tall. So
Oh,
by the time I
wow.
got to high school, they were like, "You should play netball." I was like, "I don't want to play
I don't want to
netball."
throw a ball anywhere.
But
Jeepers.
yeah, that's how I landed up doing some sports in high school. But it wasn't. It
And
wasn't
you didn't
my
thrive.
thing.
There wasn't one sport where you thought, okay,
No.
I could if I applied
No.
myself.
No.
Oh my gosh.
No,
I'm
no.
forcing the issue
I
now
know.
today.
It's like not going to
Even-
happen, babe.
Oh,
It just
wow.
that wasn't my thing. Like I say, if you ask anybody, I think their overriding memory of me is that I was
Yeah.
this really kind of like shy, quiet kid in high school.
Jeepers. So then you're 18 years old and you get this life-changing gig
Yeah.
at Radio Bob. How did you go from being shy girl mom to, or Mel rather, to that? How did you transition? Because surely that required some kind of confidence in your ability to speak, to present, to, be
Yeah.
amongst people.
Yeah. In hindsight, I don't quite know how I did it.
Yeah.
The opportunity came up and I thought, well, let's see where it goes, right? And a lot of my school friends that I still speak to always say to me, we're so surprised you do what you do because
Yeah.
this was not you. I didn't do drama. I didn't do theater. Public speak, none of that stuff at school. I just didn't like the attention and the spotlight at all, right?
Okay.
But I think what happened was I was fascinated by television. as a concept.
Sure.
I always say I'm an 80s baby in terms of I grew up with television. I loved television.
Yeah.
I loved everything about it. And so the opportunity to work in it
Sure.
came about, and I just thought, I really think this is cool. Let me see where it goes and where it takes me. And I was really lucky in that. So Bob TV was widespread, but not very widespread. So there were a few people who watched.
Sure.
But it was a good training ground to kind of understand the industry, to work on my confidence, to find myself in that space, to find my voice. And I think that's what that period did for me.
So what were you going to do before the gig came about?
I was going to be a lawyer.
Okay.
Because LA law made it look cool. And then once I started studying, I was like, oh, this is nothing
This is
like what I thought it was going to be.
Were you at Tux?
Actually, I did my first year through UNISA.
Okay.
And then in my second year, that's when I got the gig. And
Okay.
yeah.
You never looked back.
And I didn't look back.
All of that reading, that's actually probably why you also became a lawyer, because there's a lot of reading involved.
I thought so. Like I said, it just kind of seemed really cool. And I always say now, to kind of put that decision into a 16 or 17-year-old, at that time we could still matriculate at 16 or 17, to put that kind of life-changing decision into someone's hands is just like, what? And what are you thinking? Like trying to expect me to be 17 and decide on a career for life, right? I always envy the people who do that, who, kids who, they're 9 and they know, I want to be a veterinarian. And I think that's great, but a lot of us don't know what we really want. So you're kind of like figuring it out at the expense of your parents' tuition fees. But yeah, so that's, I don't know, that's how I landed up.
And so let's fast forward then to Studio Mix Days, because that was my introduction to you.
Yeah.
Is seeing you on the screen, and just, I guess also as someone who loves entertainment and the TV and radio space, it was just such a fun time in TV for all of us.
Yeah.
Whether it was 0 Hour Zone, Studio Mix, we were just so excited to see people that we could relate to, people who felt like they were our age, just in every sense of the word. So even when Penny was on there, it just felt like such a great energy. What was that experience like? Was it as fun as it looked for the rest of us, or was it really a lot of graft?
It absolutely was. And I always say we had the benefit of, a lot of things have to kind of come together to make like a great TV show. And we had the benefit of, we had Bob on the show, right, who at the time was like one of the, if not the biggest celeb in the country. Celeb/broadcasters. He would hate the term celeb, but broadcasters.
He was.
But he was, So we had that. We had a great slot. We had Friday nights. And then we started Studio Mix in November of 93.
Okay.
So just pre-democracy.
Yeah.
And there was this incredible energy in the country, right? This energy of possibility, that anything was possible, that we could achieve anything, we could do anything, we could go anywhere, we could say anything, we could, and the music was feeding into that because it was the rise of Kwaito music. And these young, smart, talented kids, who were producing stuff that was like a complete shift from the bubblegum of the 80s. And so it literally was all these things coming together to kind of make magic. And it was definitely as much fun as it looked. Like, I had the best time on that show. I really, really did.
So what was it like being a celebrity in those times?
Weird.
Very, I don't know. It looked fun, obviously.
The work and the partying was fun, but it was a very different space, a very different media landscape, right? And I always say the young guys today have such an advantage, because back then you were either in a newspaper, there were some shows that kind of would interview you, or whatever, but those were kind of the two main platforms.
Yeah.
And so the story was very much out of your hands.
Oh.
Right. And I think that's why a lot of, if you ask maybe people who were in the limelight at the same time as me back then, we all have post-traumatic stress disorder from the celeb space.
Yeah.
Because you very often got written about and stuff was said about you, but it wasn't true. And you had no recourse.
Sure.
It's not like today where you realize someone will say something, you go on your Twitter to your 2 million fans, you're like, no,
You're
guys,
lying.
that's not what happened. Here's the video, or here's the screenshot, or you didn't have that.
Jeez.
So it was very often, you would get written about and it would be utter bull. but you had no recourse to it, and you just kind of had to live with it.
Yeah.
And I always joke with, like, for example, Thomas or whoever, people who struggle with social media now, it's because we were so used to being so closed. Because we were protecting ourselves, our lives, our partners, our whatever else. And so to watch young kids now, like, here I am in the bathroom, here I am in the kitchen, here I am walking down the passage, just like, why are you telling people
Everything? And that's a real struggle for a lot of people.
It's a real thing, yeah. So that was a downside. But I mean, overall, there was, like I say, just everyone was on the come up.
Yeah.
Everyone was on the come up. And so there was a camaraderie around, between musicians, television presenters, radio broadcasters. Just there was, we were all together and looking out for each other. And yeah, it was fun.
So I guess my next question is going to be, one, did you ever have to explain any of these tabloid stories to your family? Like, oh, sorry, this is what actually happened, or it didn't happen, or it did happen. And then secondly, how were you guys mastering your craft? Because as much as it's fun, we know from being in the radio space, there has to be some kind of mastery of the craft, which you guys seem to have. Was that organic or naturally what you guys were giving us, or were you actually sitting and making sure that you were doing the right links? Was there someone coaching you? Was someone helping you behind the scenes, or was it just...
I'd say, so in terms of having to explain stuff to family, in the beginning, yes, my sisters were ready to fight all the time. All the time. They were like, we read so-and-so said this about you, like, what's happening? And I'd be like, no, calm down, guys. Because it takes an adjustment, not just for you, but for, like you say, your family to kind of be like, but if it's not true, why would they write it? And they don't quite get it. Like, but it's not true. You're like, yes. But they wrote it. Yes. Are they going to apologize? No.
No.
And so there was a bit of a struggle, but I think eventually they get to the point where they understand that what people are saying about you out there is beyond your control.
Sure.
It really was. It was like, there's nothing I can do about it. So they were able to kind of come to terms with that. And then in terms of mastering your craft, it was the Wild West out there.
I didn't expect that. Your honesty.
I'd love to say, no, we had courses and they taught us that. No, babe, it was the Wild West.
Really?
But you had leeway to make mistakes.
Sure. And that's the best way to learn.
And that is the best way, because you're going in kind of like breaking stuff, but figuring it out at the same time. And that's in terms of being a presenter or producing stuff or doing stuff on the fly. Or, they weren't big budgets. They weren't big teams. They weren't... and I always chuckle to myself when people post like a picture of Studio Mix from back in the day, and they're like, your stylist must have been... I'm like, stylist?
It was all me.
Babe, I used to get in the car on a Friday and go pick my outfit out. There was no teams of people. You don't have management. It wasn't this industry that it is now, in the sense, and that's what I'm saying. It wasn't a bad thing, because we learned on the fly,
and everyone was learning,
was learning.
Makes it
people
better.
who were the directors, the producers, everyone was learning as you kind of went along. But it made for a great environment, because, like I say, it did allow you to make mistakes, and to look back at stuff and say, oh, okay, I should do this. Like, oh, okay, I get it now, and change and adapt and adjust, and
And also, as pioneers in the game, you can pioneer
the way you do things.
Exactly.
Yes, because you're setting the standard. You're setting the bar.
A
correct.
very, very high standard.
Yeah.
Now you're on radio. Was it called Radio Metro? Metro FM?
Radio Metro. You just aged yourself
I did
there.
age myself. And weirdly enough, I didn't even listen to Metro when it was called Radio Metro. But I remember my commute to Varsity in Pretoria with my dad. And my dad used to insist, I never listened to Metro before that time, that we listened to Metro, and it was the breakfast show
at the time.
And I just remember you just being such a light and such a positive influence, because I'd also just started on campus radio as a newsreader.
Yeah.
Let's talk about news, Mal.
Yeah,
and how you developed that love and how you're still in there.
Yeah.
Because a friend of mine who's also in the industry, we were talking, we were like, we had to tap out of news because the stories, man.
Yeah.
Firstly, how did you get into news?
So
and why?
That again, this thing about exploring the things that interest you. I'd never considered radio before. And I was doing, at the time, Glenn had a feature on his show called Blacks Do Read. So they would review books and things, right? And he knew I was a reader. He knew I loved reading. So he would say to me, okay, can we give you this book? And then you come on and you review it. And I said, cool. So I did that every couple of weeks. And out of that, I got a call from management at the station who said, can you come in and see us? We'd like to talk to you about developing the relationship, maybe making it bigger, maybe making it more permanent, etc., which I did. And I thought to myself, can I do this? Yes, I can. Have I done it before? No, I haven't. Will I learn quickly? Yes, I will.
I got this.
I got this. And that's how I landed up on Metro FM.
With TT, it was such a party on that show. It was definitely developed my love for radio. And so, news journey. Did you ever work in the newsroom?
No, I didn't. So, I mean, it's a very interesting distinction between being a journalist and being a news anchor on a station. And it depends on which station you're at.
And being a news reader.
And being a news reader also. Because, those are very different roles.
Sure.
And, the SBC is such a big corporation that the newsroom is centralized.
Yeah,
you know this.
for sure.
Because there needs to be uniformity and there needs to be consistency across the board. And I've never wanted to be a journalist. That's not where my interest lies.
I did.
Did you?
Yeah.
Did you?
I wanted to be Christian Amanpour because she was in Bosnia and I'm watching hours of CNN.
That stuff is hectic, though.
Yeah, you've got to have know it as a child.
Yeah, you've got to have a certain disposition for it,
And to keep going.
Yeah, and that wasn't me. Like, I've never wanted to be a journalist. And so this role, in as much as it is about the news, but it is also is more about your general knowledge. You need to know about a specific topic, yes, but also it's about your general knowledge, being a news anchor or a news reader.
For sure.
And that's my spillion. Like, I love kind of just being up to date on everything. And that's pop culture, current affairs, news, sport, just across the board.
Yeah.
And I think that's why I'm still in it and why I still enjoy it as much as I do.
And Metro and 5 radio, in terms of personalities, that's what they thrive on. Have you seen your personality evolving over the time that you've been there? Because you've been there for quite some time. Have you felt like you've evolved in terms of your personality because of radio?
I think it's become a little bit more refined, in the sense, not necessarily evolving. Everyone always says you're the voice of reason, that's who I've always been.
Sure.
Wow. Yeah, even as like in my early 20s, I was never that kind. It just wasn't me.
You weren't dancing on tables in the club.
Well, maybe now and again, but But yeah, that was kind of I'm by nature I'm very rational. I want to look at both sides of the story. I want to get all the information, and I've always been that way. So that's what I'm saying. It's become a bit more refined over the years. And that kind of has become my groove in terms of saying the voice of reason, or to provide you with the facts, or to provide you. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, that's what it is.
And so what do you think about radio in these times? As someone who's on radio, someone who's seen radio changing over the times from, the early 2000s, how do you feel about what's happening on radio, and how have you managed to stay in the mix for as long as you have and to just be adaptable to the times?
I'll be chatting to friends who are my age. They'll be like, oh, we were listening to, station X or whatever. Like, what is happening there? Like, I don't understand. And I was like, babes, you're not the target market. Like, you're old.
This is true. I have these arguments all the time when people say they can't listen to.
Yeah, it's like, you're not the target market. The target market is 18 to 34. Are you 34? No, you're way over 34.
Exactly.
Bro. Like, let it go. It's not for you.
Sure.
And I think that's so important to realize, that you may feel young at heart, but very often when the programming is put together and the lineup is put together and what they talk about is put together on radio, it's not for you. You know what I mean? And that's okay. Like, listen to your book or your book or whatever when you're driving to work, or your talk radio
like that's
station.
A dig, Mal.
No, but what I'm saying is it's okay. You cannot expect the radio station to sound today in 2021 the way it did in 1997. When you were vibing to it, like almost 30 years, it's just not going to happen.
Yeah.
And so that's what I always tell people. And I think once you realize that, you're able to listen to radio today, at least this is what I do, with ears for today. The landscape has changed. The language, the language is the language of now. The people who are on radio are the people of now. The way they approach things, even the way they do radio, is of now. Because we come from a school that was very much based on old school, British broadcasting, sounding proper, that
That's
was
true.
then. But we've come a long way from them. And I think from that, and I think once you recognize that and appreciate that, you're able to listen to radio today and say, you know what, these kids are actually doing like amazing.
Sure.
They really are. They have the numbers, they have the listenership, they're incredibly popular. The style of presenting may be different from what you used to, but it's the style of
now.
What
a valuable point.
Yeah.
Point taken.
Yeah.
So why have you stayed as long as you have at Metro? What is keeping you there? Have other stations called you? Because you know how it works every single year. By the way, was that your experience too, that every single year you're sweating bullets because you just don't know if you're going to be the flavor of the month? And also, did you ever think that affected you psychologically? I'll tell you why I asked that, because when I left radio, I was like, I never really ever stressed about that time of the year, but I understand that stress. And I wondered if it had affected me, just like not knowing what the next year holds for you and having that anxiety, and also them holding it over your head and making you feel like, oh, you might not be here next year. Was that ever your...
I mean, that's definitely a thing, because I think, a lot of people don't know that for a large percentage of people who work in radio and television is you're a freelancer.
Sure.
You come in, you do your thing and you leave, but there's no job security.
Yeah.
It's not like being a permanent staff member or a contracted worker or whatever the case is. So of course there's uncertainty when that time of year rolls around. And you're looking at, is my contract going to be renewed? Am I going to be moved? Am I going to be, whatever the case is? So I think that's standard. Some years are better than others, depending on who's in charge. Some years you're like, no, I'm fine.
Exactly.
Other years you're like, oh my God, I think I'm going to lose my job.
I haven't said 2 words to my boss.
Exactly.
What's happening?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So you just kind of learn to roll with it.
Yeah, you do.
You
You're
do.
right.
And I think the reason that I've stayed with the station as long as I have is that, like I'm saying, I still enjoy what I do. I think when I stop enjoying it, I actually will leave. I think I actually will be like, okay, guys, I'm good. I've had a good run. I've enjoyed it, and I'm out. But I really still fundamentally love going on air, having that light go on, and contributing, and having someone message or tweet and say, oh my God, I was in hysterics on the floor this morning from what you said. Then you're like,
my job is done.
Yeah. That's why I do it, to entertain and to inform and to
have fun.
To have fun.
Is radiotherapy for you at all?
Sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes, yeah. Sometimes it is about going on air and you're able to kind of work through stuff or kind of have it be an outlet or a release or a... and like I said, particularly when you then touch on things that are important to you.
Sure.
And you get, whether it's experts in to chat to them to give you more information, or you get people going, I have the exact same problem. Or,
the connection with the...
Then it becomes...
That's what I miss the most about radio, is just connecting with people on an instant level.
Yes.
And also knowing that connection, as shallow as it is in the moment, it's actually deeper than you perceive it to be. So even you, and my experience of you has been since I was 18, 19.
Right.
And I am double that now. And it's just remarkable to think that you've been part of my journey without you even knowing it. Just as a person and as a broadcaster. So,
and the thing is, it goes so quickly.
Yeah.
Like you actually don't realize how long you've been at a place, because it feels like, okay, I'm doing this cool, and then like the years kind of roll one into the other, and as long as you're still having fun, you don't often think about it until someone says, so you've been there for 20 years. You're like, what?
How?
Who? What? Yeah.
Also, you don't look like you've been there for
I've been there a long
The rest of us
time,
aged, and Mel was like, no, I'm going to Benjamin Button. I'm going to show you guys that I might have started in 93, but I'm going to look younger and cuter than everyone.
As we go.
Was that planned? Did you plan to do that? Because it feels like an attack.
No. Well, are you feeling like dragged?
Babe, I'm always just like, but Mel looks better. Is it the yoga?
You know what it is? It is getting to a point in my life where I'm really just okay with who I am.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And it's a freedom that has come with being in my 40s, and just really being fine with, this is me.
Sure.
I'm not trying to impress anyone. I'm not trying to bowl or win anyone over. I'm not trying to prove a point.
Sure.
I just do the things that make me happy, that bring me joy. And I think that is what you see on the outside. But it's being driven by an internal process of just, yoga contributes to that, no
Yeah.
doubt. But yeah, it's freedom. It's, like you spend your 20s thinking, oh, I wonder what they're saying about me or whatever. When you're 40, you're like, I actually don't care.
I'm tired.
They probably aren't even talking about
Yeah.
me. But even if they are, I don't care.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's what it is.
I would be wrong if I didn't have this conversation with you, but I want to talk about being a woman in the entertainment industry, particularly because there are so many fights that we've probably had to fight silently. What has been that for you, or have you witnessed other women just being in the industry and not being respected and given, the kudos that they do deserve? What has that
Yeah.
experience been like for you, just as someone watching other women in the industry and as a woman in the industry?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's incredibly frustrating to watch women who are as talented as men, and sometimes more talented than, not get the recognition they deserve. And I think sometimes that plays out a lot more in the radio space than it does, for example, television or entertainment.
Sure.
This idea of if you're on radio, then, as a woman, you must be the sidekick to a guy, or, that sort of thing. And it's incredibly frustrating to watch.
And why do you think that is?
I think it's the people who are in charge who have an old school mentality around whether a woman can hold a drive show, whether a woman can carry a drive show, whether the advertisers will advertise with a woman if it's just her as the main host. So it's attitudes and perceptions that we kind of need to address, that we need to change, that we need to say, you know what, good radio is good radio, regardless of who is doing it. And I think it's changing a little bit, but nowhere near enough. Nowhere near enough.
Definitely nowhere near enough. And I love that you mentioned that there are a lot of women who are more talented than the men.
Yeah.
Has that ever been your experience where you found yourself in a space where you thought, I could have done this job better?
I think that's maybe happened once or twice. But I mean, again, I play in a different space, right, in terms of being involved in the news side of things versus being a DJ. People say, why don't you be a DJ? It's like, well, I don't know if that's my thing. I just, yeah.
But you were a VJ. It was your thing.
But can you see me back announcing like AKA babe or whoever?
Man.
I mean, now it's like, I don't know so much. So I play in a slightly different space, right?
Sure.
As far as that goes. So I can't say yay or nay.
Is there space in the entertainment industry where you would like to play going forward? Is there something that you haven't tried in your time that you think this would be the ultimate thing for me to try, not even to maybe be an expert at, because you're definitely a leader in the entertainment space, but is there something that you wish that you could still do?
So, I mean, I think like very many of us, we're toying with the idea of like a podcast, a vlogcast,
Sure.
And we were chatting kind of before we started around the freedom that it provides for you. And I love that. So I think that is something that I'd like to explore without the confines of rules of television or rules of sponsors or rules of commissioning editors, or you have the freedom to kind of talk about the things that you want to talk about, the way you want to talk about it, for how long you want to talk about it, all these other. So I think that might be a space that I could still explore. And I think, not even I think, but especially as an older woman, the entertainment industry as a whole values youth, right? And there's always a new hot young thing.
Sure.
But I think we're disregarding the value and the wisdom and the knowledge that an older woman can bring to a space. And that is somewhere that I think there's a gap.
Definitely, especially locally. I think overseas they've kind of cottoned onto that. The older generation definitely are also playing in this space, but they're doing it. They're not competing with younger audiences and younger presenters and vloggers and everything. And that's the beauty of it.
And I get it because, for the longest time, there wasn't enough. The playground wasn't big enough.
Sure.
The playground was this big. And so everyone is fighting for this kind of piece of pie. That's how it was for a really long time. And I always make the example with like an Oprah. We see Oprah and we go, God, she's incredible. She's been doing that show for 35 years. Her experience.
Yeah.
Oh, experience, Poppy. Oh, can't touch it. You can't match it. Whereas here, it's like, but Poppy's been doing that thing for 4 years now.
It's enough.
Poppy? It's enough. We're enough of Poppy.
Tired. That's actually very true.
Right? But I think the difference is because the playground has been so small for so long. But now with the freedom that comes with the internet and social media and all these different platforms, everyone is starting to realize there's space for me.
Sure.
I can create that space. I can carve it out. It can be mine. And I don't feel like someone else will come along and take it away from me, or someone else is competing with me for it. It's just that's the community you build, as they say.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I agree. Let's chat about you as a mother. First of all, how did you pick Zwei? Mel, I'm just saying that I know how many people slide into your DM.
Oh, wow.
You had many a man throwing themselves at you. At the time, now, even, as a young person, why did you pick Zwei?
Because he was incredibly funny. He was incredibly talented.
Yes.
He was incredibly kind.
Tick, tick, tick.
And he still is.
Nodding. I'm dying. Mel's daughter's here.
I know, she wanted to come to the podcast today.
That's so cute.
But it was all those things.
Yeah.
And he's I don't know if you've ever really spent time with him at all in any kind of space.
Cricket once or twice. He's very happy, chilled.
Yeah, exactly.
Zen, quite a lot like you.
Well, I think we're different in that he's a lot more talkative, a lot more social, right?
Well, he's closer.
Yeah. And so, those were just sort of all the things that really appealed to me. And we really just clicked. We were both in our 20s and we really just clicked.
And thriving. I was with Kabelo over the weekend and he was like, we've lived with Mal. But everyone has such a light or a gleam when I speak about you. Literally people are like, oh, you're talking to Mal. Their eyes get bigger and they're like, you're so lucky. So I really value your time. What was it like being pregnant on air? I'll tell you why I asked. That sounds very weird, a question. As I said it, I was like wait, go back. I ask because I remember when we started on radio, and even when I was getting towards my 20s, I worked with a producer and a lovely person called Kath Grenfell.
Yes.
But there was always weird murmurings when people would fall pregnant and they were in their 20s and they were like, oh, so how are you still going to go to the club if you're on radio and you have to live what your listeners are living, which is obviously at the time, not a lot of people were pregnant in their 20s, or that's what we thought.
Yes.
But we were always told in some way or shape or form that being a young woman on radio and falling pregnant wasn't an option. That you would be replaced with the next person who obviously wasn't pregnant.
Yeah.
So what was that like for you?
On that, honestly, I didn't think about.
Yeah.
And that never was an issue for me. I think the space at Metro at the time was very accommodating.
Really?
I honestly never felt that falling pregnant would put my job in jeopardy.
Wow, we felt it.
Really?
Yeah,
That's
it was.
wild.
I don't know why women in particular, obviously because we're the bearer of the children and we look pregnant, but it was always like you can't be telling us about the club on air and then
you can't
sitting
go
there. Exactly, you can't go and just for them it didn't match what they were presenting.
I never knew that.
Yeah. Ask
never knew
anyone
that.
who worked at Fire.
Wow.
Who was a young woman at the time. Things have obviously changed now.
Yeah.
And thank goodness for that. But kudos to Metro.
No, like I said, I never felt that. I worked with Unati, who was pregnant at the same time.
Yeah.
None of us ever felt there was this kind of threat or there was this feeling of like you can't still deliver on radio even though you're a mother.
Sure.
And I think, a lot of people who had been on air our time and many years before that were moms.
Yeah.
Were moms.
And did you take leave when you fell pregnant? How long was that?
I did. With both my kids, I took about 6 weeks.
Okay.
And again, the life of a freelancer.
6 weeks, you're gone by the time.
Yeah.
They're like, Malhu.
It's the life of a freelancer.
Yeah.
So I took 6 weeks with both my kids, and then I was back. But it was brutal at the time with both of them because I was doing breakfast radio.
Jeepers.
So you're kind of spending nights tending to a sleepy, non-sleeping, colicky, cryy baby. And then when that alarm goes off, you just want to bite off someone's head. So it was brutal. It really was. I always say those first couple of years.
What has been the most amazing thing about your experience as a mother?
Gosh, is the most amazing thing, right, is so you become a parent and you really are fundamentally doing this. You're crossing your fingers and you're hoping for the best. I know no one's going to want to hear this, but it is because nothing prepares you for being a parent. And so when the kid arrives and you start to, I always liken it to getting a blank SD card that you need to format.
Sheesh.
You are formatting this person.
In every way.
In every single possible way, right? And that's you teaching them how to eat, how to brush their teeth, how to interact with other people. You're teaching them hopefully to be kind, to be interested, to be interesting. You're teaching them all these things.
Sure.
And particularly for me now, so my kids are older, my son's about to turn 15, my daughter is 10, is to see them become these little people. And that is like the most gratifying thing, or, you send them out into the world and people come back with them and they say, oh, your son's incredibly kind.
Sure.
Well-mannered. He's respectful. Or your daughter's, sweet. And, all these things. And you're just like, okay, yes, I did that. That was me.
Exactly.
And that's just really... You really are kind of you want to turn out decent human beings. And that for me has always been the thing. I really just want to turn out kids that are kind and respectful and decent. It far outweighs academic achievements or sports achievements or anything else.
So now you're into yoga.
Yes, ma'am.
And I say now, but you've been a yogi for a while.
About 5-ish years, yeah.
But you recently became a yoga instructor.
Mm-hmm. I did.
Why yoga? And what does it do for you?
How long have you got, Pops?
Oh, it's one of those. Do you know why I ask? Because it takes a special kind of person. Do you remember Misha Depilia?
No.
Okay, she was our sales manager at 5.
Yeah.
And you guys have a similar energy, a similar maturity. Yoga is for special people. People like
Yoga
you and
is
Misha.
for everybody. That's our
Is that what you're
departure
trying
point. Yoga is for everybody.
Yeah. I love Bikram.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
Bikram is awesome.
But everything else, I do not have the patience. I do not have the time.
Really?
Babe, if I'm stretching, it must be a 2-minute thing.
Like, let's go, let's go,
yeah,
let's go.
Yeah, and I must feel it. And yeah, how do you have the patience for something like that?
Well, so I initially started practicing yoga when I was pregnant with my daughter, actually.
Oh, wow.
Just because my first childbirth my recovery from it had been difficult.
Oh, wow.
Because it had been a cesarean.
Yeah.
And I just physically, I struggled after my son was born for the longest time. So by the time I fell pregnant with her, I was like, oh, I'm not doing that again.
Sure.
Like, I physically need to be in better shape for childbirth, fundamentally. And so I started practicing yoga while I was pregnant, and it was lovely, and I enjoyed it. And she arrived, and I thought, oh, great, I'm going to go back to yoga. And I think I did 2 more classes, and then I was like, I'm tired, I can't do this. And I left it.
It's exhausting.
And then about 5 years ago, going through a difficult time in my personal life, and wanting to find a way to deal with what was going on in a way that was healthy and constructive, but that was also in private. And that's how I landed up being back on the mat, because I could practice at home.
Sure.
And it was through that process that I was about to go through my divorce. I lost my father in the same year. So there just was a lot of upset and turmoil. And yoga helped me navigate that process, as well as bring me back to myself. And it just provided a sense of stability that I needed. And that yoga will give you what you need if you allow it to,
Sure.
right? Because you may not figure out or know exactly what it is that you're looking for or need.
Yeah.
But all the mat asks you to do is show up every day. Some days you show up on the mat and all you do is cry for 30 minutes.
Yeah.
You know, and that's okay. Other days you show up and you're like, okay, this is good. Today I go, okay, cool, you know. Other days are just more meditative, where you're sitting and you're processing and you're thinking and you're kind of working through stuff in your head. Because I think sometimes we don't allow ourselves that space when we're going through things to actually take time and say, okay, let me sit and work through this in a healthy, constructive way. And so yoga's provided me all of that and more, and just a change in outlook on how I won't say a change, but an affirmation of how I've kind of been navigating my life, and how I move through the world. And it just has reinforced that for me a lot, in the sense of that good energy about arriving in a space and being with people and just having good energy and good karma, and what I want the world to be like. I've got to show up like that.
Sure.
I can't be another way and then expect the world to be all love and peace and happiness if I'm not like that. So it's multifaceted. It's incredibly interesting. I can talk about it for ages.
So yoga to you is what running is to me. I love that you
Right.
mentioned your father's passing, and in the context of the yoga, because that was a question that I wanted to ask about how you process that as someone, you know, who loves their father. Would you say that you were a daddy's girl?
Completely.
Yeah.
Completely. You know, and his passing was unexpected. And I always say I never know which is better, unexpected or you see it coming. Both suck.
Exactly. It's death.
It's death. But very much a daddy's girl. We were very close. And like I say, without it was yoga and it was therapy. I'm also a big proponent of therapy. So I was in therapy weekly for about a year.
Wow.
Just to help me deal with what was going on in my life. Yeah.
And how do you think that's shaped your outlook in terms of life now? Do you carry a lot of what your father was with you? Do you feel it? Do you feel the responsibility to live up to that?
Yeah, we were very similar in nature. And so with his passing, you know, I do feel a sense of responsibility for my mom and my sisters.
Sure.
And kind of, and I always say to them, I'm like, what would Dad want? What would Dad want, right? Like, let's keep our eye on the, but what would Dad want us to do? Like, let's, you know, when people start to kind of veer off and start, you know, what would Dad want? And just kind of having that sense of responsibility of kind of keeping us together and making sure that we're okay. And it's
powerful.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the future for Melanie Bala. What are we looking forward to? Where would you like to go? Who would you like to be?
I am who I am. I don't think there's anything that I'm aspiring to being at this point. Sure. I've just, like I said, what I was talking about, that freedom of being 48 and just accepting who I am. And knowing that some days I show up and I'm imperfect and I'm short-tempered.
You're 48. You guys are dribbling us. I'm going to just give up on life now because, wow.
Babe, yeah. So for me, I really don't feel the need to prove anything to anyone. I can only show up as my authentic self, and you either vibe with it or you don't. And if you don't, that's on you. That's cool. There's no hard feelings.
I've never met a Mel Bala hater.
You know, really?
Nope.
Someone said to me the other day, you've got a great PR machine. I was like, what?
Just be like, I am the PR machine. It's actually true. You are.
You've got to embody. You've got to embody what you believe. You know, I can't stress that enough. Like, I can't talk love and light and happiness, but when you run into me, you're like,
what's going on here?
You know, I've got to embody it, and I think that's what I wake up every day and try and do is to say, like I say, I fall short. You know, if you ask my daughter, she'll be like, yeah, she shouts at us. Yes, I do shout at you, but I'll also acknowledge that, you know what, I shouldn't have shouted at you. I was wrong, and I apologize.
Sure.
You know, to literally every opportunity, every moment in your life, you have a chance to choose differently. So when you fall short of what you think you should be doing, you have the next moment to correct it or to try and fix it or to sort it out. And so I very much live in the now. So when you ask me about where I'm going to be, hopefully on a beach teaching yoga somewhere, maybe in like Accra or like, Malindi or something. Like
Yeah.
I literally could just chill and just do that. Because like I've been saying, all the amazing things that have happened in my life that has brought me here have been unexpected.
Sure.
Television, radio, yoga. None of those things, if you'd asked me at 17, is that what you're going to do? I would have said, yeah. So I'm very open to the magic of possibility
And
and
to the
new
magic of
opportunities.
life.
Yes.
I'm excited for you.
Aw.
And I love that energy. We
Thank
need
you,
more
baby.
of that.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for your
Oh,
time.
so
So great to
good.
sit down and chat and listen to you talking, not on the radio.
Oh, thanks, Pops.
Jeepers, you waking up again.
Yeah, can you believe it?
No, I can't because I wake up pretty early and then I hear you guys and I'm like, no, it's not early enough.
It's like, what?
not
I'm back
early
on
enough.
breakfast radio again, and we'll see. It's meant to be for a couple of months, but we'll
Okay.
see, what happens with it.
Well, great to have you back
Thank you.
on Breakfast Radio.
Thank you.
All the best.
Thanks, Pops.
Thank you for your time. Oh, my word.
Yo.